Welcome back to Verbal Sparring, and welcome to the State of the UFC, March 2025. If you are new to the channel, if you are new to this series, let me catch you up to speed. This is a monthly video series where I break down each fight card by the numbers, what weight classes saw the most action, how many finishes did we see, what UFC debutants made a splash in their first fight, and much more. We will take a look card by card, and March was jam-packed with 5 Saturdays in the month, and all 5 of them held UFC events. We will start by breaking down UFC Vegas 103 in the Apex, in which it was headlined by Manel Kape and Asu Almabayev in the flyweight division. This fight card held 10 fights with 4 KO TKOs and 6 decisions. We saw 2 first-round knockouts and 1 in the second and third, and the decisions were split 50-50 with 3 unanimous and 3 split. 5 individual divisions had 1 fight: heavyweight, middleweight, welterweight, lightweight, and women's flyweight. Featherweight held 3 fights, and the flyweight division had 2. And in terms of how the UFC rankings were directly impacted by the results of this card, we first saw the number 6 ranked Manel Kape defeat the number 8 ranked Asu Almabayev via TKO in round number 3. We would see the number 8 ranked Asu Almabayev drop 1 spot to number 9, and the number 9 ranked Steve Erceg rise up to number 8, and as you'll see in the very end of this video, those two are now right back to where they started the month. And secondly was also in the flyweight division as the unranked Ramazan Tamirov defeated the number 12 ranked veteran Charles Johnson via decision. Ramazan made his debut into the rankings, cracking in at number 13. Charles Johnson dropped from number 12 to number 15, and the number 13 ranked Bruno Silva rose 1 spot to number 12. Next we move into the lone pay-per-view of March 2025, UFC 313 at the T-Mobile Arena in Las Vegas, Nevada, headlined by the light heavyweight title fight between Alex Pereira and Magomed Ankalaev. This fight card also featured 10 bouts in total. It had 2 knockouts, 2 submissions, and 6 decisions. Both knockouts came in the first round, and the submissions, there was 1 in the first and 1 in the second. Of the 6 decisions, 5 of them saw all 3 judges agree, and there was 1 split decision sprinkled in. Much like UFC Vegas 103, not only were there 10 fights on this card, but there were also 5 individual divisions that held just 1 fight. Those were light heavyweight, welterweight, featherweight, flyweight, and strawweight. And then we saw 3 fights at lightweight and 2 fights at middleweight. We saw 3 divisions be impacted here in terms of their rankings, and it started obviously with that main event as we saw the number 1 contender Magomed Ankalaev become the undisputed UFC light heavyweight champion. And then of course Alex Pereira dropped to number 1. Ignacio Bahamondes got the biggest victory of his career by submitting the number 13 ranked Jalen Turner in the very first round. He cracked in the final spot of the lightweight rankings at number 15. Jalen Turner went from 13 to unranked following this loss, and paired with the fact that he decided to call it a career in the aftermath of this one. And we would see the number 15 ranked Benoit Saint Denis rise up 2 spots to number 13. And lastly, in the strawweight division, we saw the former title challenger and 5th ranked Amanda Lemos hold her spot in the top 5 by defeating the rising prospect and 7 ranked Yasmin Lucindo via unanimous decision. Lucindo would drop just 1 spot to number 8, and Amanda Ribas would take that spot, going from 8 to 7. The second stint in the Apex in March was headlined between the rematch of Marvin Vettori and Roman Dolidze. This card featured 13 fights with 9 finishes and just 4 decisions. Of the 9 finishes, 5 were by knockout and 4 were by way of submission. There were 3 first-round knockouts and 2 second-round knockouts, and 1 submission in the first and third round and 2 in the second. And out of the 4 decisions, 3 of them were unanimous and just 1 split. And something extremely unique happened on this UFC Vegas 104 card, as we saw fights in all 11 UFC weight classes. And the only weight class that had more than 1 fight on this card was the bantamweight division with 3. For the movement in the rankings, we saw the number 12 ranked Roman Dolidze avenge his loss from 2 years ago against Marvin Vettori, who was number 8 coming in. He did that by getting a decision win. Roman would go from number 12 to number 9. Marvin would go from 8 to 10. Then we would see Anthony Fluffy Hernandez rise 1 spot from 9 to 8, and Brendan Allen and Paulo Costa both drop 1 spot from 10 and 11 to 11 and 12. And the number 12 ranked Waldo Cortez Acosta held his spot in the top 15 of the heavyweight division by spoiling the heavyweight debut of Superman Ryan Spann, and he did that with a second round knockout. and he was awarded by jumping up one spot in the rankings to number 11, and Jamil Gaziev, who was number 11, bumped to number 12. UFC London would also feature 13 fights, but it was the complete opposite, as this time we would only see 4 finishes, all 4 of them were submissions, and 9 decisions. There was 1 submission in the first round, 2 in the second round, and our very first championship round submission, where Sean Brady finished Leon Edwards in the 4th round. And out of the 9 decisions, 7 were unanimous and 2 were split. We saw 1 fight apiece in 6 different weight classes: heavyweight, light heavyweight, middleweight, featherweight, bantamweight, and flyweight. 3 fights at lightweight, and 2 fights at welterweight and strawweight. Sean Brady took the UFC London main event on about a month's notice, replacing Jack Della Maddalena, who was moved to the UFC 315 main event title fight against Bilal Muhammad in May, and made good on the short notice replacement by defeating the former champion Leon Edwards for the biggest victory of his career, and as we already mentioned, got the finish via submission in round number 4. Sean Brady moved from number 5 all the way up to number 1 in the world at 170, and the former champion and number 1 ranked Leon Edwards dropped to number 3. Other former champion Kamaru Usman dropped 3 to 4, and the soon-to-be title challenger Jack Della Maddalena dropped from 4 to 5. And Carlos Alberg improved his win streak to 8 victories in a row, none bigger than taking out the former champion, that is Jan Blachowicz. He was number 6 heading into the bout, and he now finds himself at number 3. The former champion Jan Blachowicz dropped from 3 to 5, and Alexander Rakic dropped from 5 to 6. And last but not least, the UFC returned to Mexico City, Mexico, headlined by Brandon Moreno and Steve Erceg at the Arena CDMX. This card had 12 fights in total with 4 knockouts, 1 submission, and 7 decisions. All 5 finishes, both knockouts and submission, came in round number 1. And of the decisions, 6 were unanimous and 1 was a split. We saw 1 fight each at middleweight and strawweight, 2 fights each at featherweight and bantamweight, and 3 fights each at lightweight and flyweight. And the only movement that happened was in the flyweight division, and it's something that I already talked about at the beginning. Steve Erceg dropped his fight to the number 2 ranked Brandon Moreno. He now finds himself on a 3-fight skid and dropped from number 8 to number 9, and Asul Almabayev went back from 9 to 8. And now let's take a quick look at where the pound-for-pound rankings sit as we head into the month of April. Valentina Shevchenko still sits atop the throne of the women's pound-for-pound rankings as she awaits her next challenge at UFC 315 May 10th in Canada in the co-main event. She will be taking on the number 1 contender, Manon Fiorot, and that could definitely shake up these pound-for-pound rankings. And rounding out the pound-for-pound for the women at number 15 is Macy Barber, who is slated to have a main event against Erin Blanchfield, I believe, at the end of May. And in the men's pound-for-pound rankings, we see the number 1 ranked lightweight king, Islam Makhachev, remaining at the top of the throne, and he is also awaiting his next title challenger. Is it Ilia Topuria, who has vacated his featherweight championship since the last time we had this video series and is looking to make his transition permanently to the lightweight division? And capping out the rankings at number 15 is Arman Saryukian, who was the number 1 contender in January, but now finds himself in Lingo, awaiting to see if it's a title shot next or another number 1 contender fight. So for the month in total, 5 cards featured 58 fights. There were 26 finishes, 15 by knockout, 11 by submission, and 32 decisions. With 26 finishes and 58 fights, that brings our finishing rate for the month to 44.8%. Of the 15 knockouts, 11 of them happened in the very first round, 3 in the second round, and 1 in the third. For the submissions, we saw 4 in round 1, 5 in round 2, 1 in round 3, and 1 in round 4, the first championship round submission of the year. And out of those 32 decisions, 24 of them would see all 3 judges agree on the winner, and 8 of them would see some judges differ. And for the 3rd consecutive month, the women's bantamweight division continues to be the least active weight class in the entire UFC, having just 1 fight again for the 3rd straight month. Luckily, at least we have the championship being defended at UFC 316 in June. Hopefully that'll catapult some action. And for the first time this year, lightweight takes the crown for most fights in the month of March. They had 11, the first division in all 3 months of the year thus far to have double-digit fights. Then we would see 8 fights each at featherweight and flyweight, 6 fights each at middleweight and bantamweight, 5 fights at strawweight and welterweight, 3 fights at heavyweight and light heavyweight, and 2 fights at women's flyweight. And now let's talk about which UFC newcomers made good on their debuts, and there were 6 this month. For the first event of the month, on March 1st at UFC Vegas 103, we saw the heavyweight debutant Mario Pinto make good on that debut with a devastating second-round knockout against the former Jacksonville Jaguar Austin Lane. At UFC Vegas 104, we saw last year's Dana White Contender Series alum Kevin Vallejos knock out Seung-Woo Choi in the very first round in the featherweight division. One of the most notable debuts of the month, in my opinion, was at UFC London, where we saw Alexia Tainara come in on about a week's notice and take out the seasoned veteran Molly McCann in her home country. And not only did she get the victory, but she submitted Molly in the very first round. And we saw 3 UFC newcomers at UFC Mexico make good on that first fight in the promotion. We would see Markel Medeiros have a very close split decision with Austin Hubbard in the lightweight division. Ateba Gautier, the middleweight version of Francis Ngannou, had a nasty first round knockout against Jose Medina. He was the first man to ever knock out Medina. And David Martinez, not only from Mexico, but from Mexico City, Mexico, in the bantamweight division, got a knockout in front of his home city. And last but not least, what events do we have to look forward to in the month of April? Well, it's a little toned down from the insane 5-event stretch in March, as we will see 3 events in April. It starts this coming Saturday with UFC Vegas 105, headlined by the number 8 ranked Josh Emmett and the number 10 ranked undefeated Lerone Murphy. Then we will have the biggest pay-per-view of the year so far, and that is UFC 314, headlined by the number 1 ranked former champion Alexander Volkanovski and the number 3 ranked Diego Lopez fighting for the vacated featherweight championship. Then we will have a week off on April 19th and come back April 26th in Kansas City, Missouri, as we will see the brand new main event hot off the presses, the number 7 ranked Ian Machado Gary looking to bounce back from his first ever loss to Shavkat Rakhmonov in December, and in order to do so, he will have to take out the undefeated in the UFC fighting nerd Carlos Prates, who currently sits at number 13. So that is it for the month of March, the state of the UFC. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to drop a like and subscribe to the channel if you are new. Every month you can look forward to this series alongside weekly fight breakdowns talking about the best fights and the biggest and best storylines and what is at stake. I also recap the most meaningful results from each card and give my thoughts and opinions on MMA news and fight announcements. You can join the community on social media at Verbal Spar MMA on X, Instagram, and TikTok, and you can follow on your favorite audio listening platforms such as Spotify and Apple, where every Friday and Monday podcast episodes release there. Have a great rest of your week, and I will see you all in the next video.